you guys may or may not know, but hopefully you do now. Karen Withstandley. And Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you ended up doing what you do?
I'm an independent saddle fitter. I do not rep any brands. I have been doing this for about 18 years. I was a vet tech. I was certified in a couple different types of massage therapy. I was a centered riding instructor, and I was starting chiropractic training when they came down with saying basically you have to be a vet to be a chiropractor in most states, so I didn't see the point in continuing. And a friend of mine encouraged me to look into saddle fit because vet schools don't apparently cover that enough. So we needed to look at why some of my horses had some issues. I am not going to do PowerPoints today because it makes a lot more sense for me to show you physically some things that might help you with the 3D deal. But on our Refined Equine Facebook page, I have put a post, and if you feel like dragging your phones out and looking, or later, there are photos that are going to be relevant to what I'm discussing today, and you can let a neighbor look at it, you can comment on them. I'm really happy to answer some questions that are basically general questions about what we're talking about today. If you have personal things you need to discuss, I would love it if you could just keep it to the comments on that post so that we can roll through and get everybody out of here at a reasonable hour and address personal things on the side. All right? So I'm going to base my talk on Luby's discussion, and I have a lovely horse here that I've worked with before. And he is, I hope, more than happy to stand here patiently while we play with him with saddle trees. When I do get a client that tells me, well, my horse has back pain, I want to know why they think it's back pain. Is the back reactive? Who found out the back is reactive? Are they just touching it? Because if you hit certain areas, certain acupressure points, acupuncture points, your horse is going to react, and a horse's back should react to pressure. The idea is to not impede the back in any way so the saddle continually feels pressure. You want it to reduce that, soften it, and distribute the contact so that that horse can come up through the back and work properly. In kissing spine situations, what we have very commonly is a tree that might be a little bit too narrow, too wide, and bridging. Bridging is a big problem, and you'll see a photo on that Facebook page. It's going to show just an English saddle tree. The English saddle tree is going to show you basically what's inside of an English saddle if you've never seen one. It's the skeleton. And what we have is a dressage saddle, and it might look pretty crazy, this position, but this is what a lot of dressage saddles look like until they're webbed properly to give you the depth. This is a small seated one, but they can be pretty extreme. This is a steel spring tree. This is one of the best trees on the market. There's no flex to it. It's a solid tree. You have a laminated wood tree with a steel spring that runs around it and seat springs to absorb rider impact. We have a nice solid metal gullet plate. This is our gullet plate, and these are the points of the tree which we need at certain angles for certain horses to free their shoulders. I also have some Western saddle trees. If there's anybody who does Western, I can pop some Western trees on, yes? Great. So we'll look at that too. If you have a kissing spine horse, it's really important to work with a solid tree like a spring tree, a steel spring tree. Any of the flex saddles, the flex trees, that allows the rider error you're going to move, and that saddle will move and cause more movement through the back. The idea of the tree is to stabilize the horse's back and protect it from imbalance in a rider, and we all have imbalance. I work with anybody from me, who barely rides anymore, has a lack of time, to Olympic riders, and everybody has imbalance. Everybody has asymmetry that they're compensating for. Horses have asymmetry. So we do the best we can with saddles, pads, trees to compensate for asymmetry and to try to get the horse as straight as possible. So why don't we have this lovely boy, and you can introduce him out, please. And
This is Rascal. Rascal's a 9-year-old Irish draft.
And Rascals, yes, he is a pretty big boy. He's a nice round horse, and I will tell you, a lot of these big round horses have much less of a kissing spine problem than you would find in those narrow-spined thoroughbreds. The thoroughbreds just don't have the support structure of the longissimus dorsi and the serratus muscles, and a weaker spinous ligament that's going to hold everything still. These guys tend to have less kissing spine problems. I use a thermal imager when people tell me, oh, well, I don't know, my horse got back pain. The first thing I'm going to do, and in your appointment request, when we let people know that I'm going to be coming, I'm going to explain that I want your horse inside, unblanketed, dry and clean before the appointment for an hour. And that doesn't really happen often. But with thermal technology, it's frowned on because there's so many variables. But if I know that this horse is in a controlled condition, I understand the thermal image and I can make something of it. So you'll see in that Facebook, the photos, you're going to see that this thermal image that I'm going to take can point out where there's a possible impingement, atrophy, something like that. A saddle should never touch the spine. So if you see some heat on a horse's back after somebody rode, something's wrong with the horse's back because a saddle shouldn't touch the spine. We have a nice wide gullet. It should be a minimum of 3 fingers. There are no horses or ponies that have spines that are narrower than that. You went 3 to 4 fingers. On a horse with kissing spine, you really want a wider gullet. Wider is better because you're going to put weight down the muscle here, right before the rib heads, and keep it away from the spine. So as that, especially if you have any kind of chiropractic issues with your horse, subluxation, vertebrae out, this or that, any kind of arthritis, bony arthritis, you want wider and get that weight bearing on the muscles instead. Thermal imager is pretty cool. It doesn't take very long to get an image. So right here I have a cold wall. I'm going to put my hand here for a second and pull it off. Everybody see that? The pressure, my palm pressure was right there. It's quick. I put a saddle on a horse, wait a minute, let him shift around, get comfortable, pull the saddle off, and we can see bridging where there's a lot of heat in part of the saddle, no contact in another part. Your horse, yes, okay, so right, when you warm up, hopefully that horse will come into it. But if you don't have good contact to start, the horse is less likely to want to come up into the saddle. So that's my job, is to try to fit the horse as well as I can statically, but in motion is a completely different story. So we really want to see what happens in motion. So you'll see some thermal images on there that are going to show hot points. And bone does not show heat. It's going to be that spinous ligament that Luby was really discussing several times. I'm going to see hot points in the soft tissue generally between, so I'm not going to see the spinous process itself. I'm going to see those impingement areas between, and they are going to light up, and it's pretty significant. At that point, I'm like, oh, do I want to throw the word kissing spine out? Probably not. But I am going to encourage somebody. I'm like, well, there could be a little, maybe arthritic change, impingement. Why don't we have a vet come? I would advise that you get a vet out, take a look, see, get some imaging done, and see what a good opinion would be before I'm comfortable fitting the saddle or recommending something. If I think it's something that, okay, saddle's not bad, let's work with it, get somebody out, and let's follow up, I'll do that. A lot of the time you might have a saddle that's not quite right, and let's put another pad on so hopefully it doesn't pinch. But the problem is there's pinching somewhere. And if you have a pair of snug shoes on and you put on a bunch of wool socks trying to soften pressure points, it's going to squeeze the Jesus out of your feet somewhere else, and it's going to be counterproductive. So what I'm going to do first off is let's take a look at this horse's saddle. See what I'm going to jump saddle. We're going to take a look at what his jump saddle looks like. I'm going to talk about different types of trees, scapula clearance. One thing that's really important is you have enough rocker, which is the curve front to back on a saddle. That's going to be this here. Bridging is when it's too flat. You have your contact here, very little in the middle. So let's pop this on his back. Okay, so what we have here, let's have him, follow the saddle, let's have him step forward, spin his butt towards the indoor, and everybody can see the front of the saddle. So much for cooperative. That's lovely. So, I'd like everybody to take a look at this. So can we all see the gullet, the front head plate on the saddle and the gullet? We have a pretty steep angle here. His scapula is here. The tree angle is here. I'm going to come around the other side and show everybody else the same thing. Hopefully you can see it. Excellent. So, scapula angle from the spine to the top of the scapula, tree angle. This is too narrow. So what this is doing is this is squeezing here. What happens if you put a tree that's a bit narrow on this horse, as he steps forward and his scapula rolls back, it's going to hit the saddle and it create fishtail behind. So this horse will end up getting probably not sore at the shoulder because the saddle's going to slide back here. He's going to get sore behind from that saddle hopping side to side. One scapula pushes the saddle, the other scapula rolls back, bumps the saddle the other way. So that's called fishtailing, very common. So we're going to take this one away and we're going to put on his dressage saddle and we're going to look at the difference in how those those tree angles, the point angles fit the horse on this one. And these are both foam paneled saddles. And what I'd like, if anybody's interested in seeing what's in foam paneled saddles and flocked saddles, I have many different brands of materials here that I pulled out of saddles that you can look at. Okay. Oh, buddy. So, what do we think of that? Pretty nice, right? This is a beautiful angle here. That's really nice. I slide my hand down and it's symmetric all the way down. Very good. I put my hand under the panel from front to back. It's narrow at the back. I can slide my hand in and I can feel a little gap here and I can feel a big squeeze in the back. The panel in the back is this. His back shape is here. So we have squeeze behind the saddle. So that will cause its own set of issues in the long run, but she's using pads to compensate for that. So, and that will do, you know, some compensation. Some instances like this, like the saddle, we can occasionally put a shim between the tree and the panel and change that angle and make it a flatter angle for a broader back. But broad back horses are hard to fit. But this is definitely improvement in the shoulder for this horse. So, does anybody want to feel this quickly, the contact? Does anybody need to is anybody having this issue and needs to feel this before I take this off? You're good. You're comfortable? Okay. Good. Yep. So slide your hand. Oh, you want to? Okay. All right. Oh yeah. Go ahead. No. I was going to ask you to feel it and see if you felt the same thing on that side. Yes? Yep. Okay. Good. All right, take the saddle off.
Such a deal.
Last one, we're just going to grab a different saddle. All of these have a decent gullet width. You can slide your fingers all the way down. They're wide enough to, if this horse had any kind of kissing spine, any spinal problems, they're wide enough to sit on the muscle bands. And this is a flocked saddle, and we've never put it on him. Let's take a look. Those are foam saddles. These are flocked ones. Let's see. Okay, so that's even better. Do we all see that angle? The pommel is a nice height. It's cut back to clear a wither. And you can slide your hand down the whole panel and there's beautiful contact. This saddle's never been on this horse and I just took a guess and brought it with me. But it's nice. In a flocked panel, you have an advantage of, and I'm not for or against foam. If it fits the horse and we can work with it, that's great, totally fine. Flocked panel, we can do a whole lot more because we can balance the rider. I can adjust the rider position, which in this would be lovely. We have a big choice of billets a lot of the time. Most horses, you don't want to use a point billet. That horse has to have no wither and really want to shove a saddle up the neck. to use a point billet because that comes off the point of the tree and will eventually squeeze this horse here. But this is a nice fit.
What's the point billet?
Point billet. The point billet here works. It attaches to the point of the tree,
Okay.
which I can show you on that other one. But some saddles have points, some do not. A lot of horses, a lot of dressage saddles do, and a lot of horses they are inappropriate for. They are highly inappropriately used, and a lot of it hides rider flaw. A lot of riders want to push in the dressage seat. Deborah, you've seen this. They sit back into the back of the saddle and drive forward with a short rein, and that saddle wants to run up the horse's neck. That is not a saddle fit problem. That is a rider balance and a horse abdominally weak. He doesn't lift his abdomen, and he's not working properly. So the rider is shoving the saddle up the horse's neck.
So does the first billet always attach to the tree, or it's just
Not
some
always,
saddles?
no. This is
Okay.
this is specifically a point billet on
Okay.
here. So.
What's the original design for a point billet? What would be the
So that was a
indication?
British thing because we have a lot of cobs with barrels and mutton withers. There's not a lot of shape to them.
Okay.
So they didn't have a point billet to start. They used cruppers, and when that was very unpopular and they realized how much damage that can do by bottling up the spine itself and the hind end, they started to go to the point billet to prevent these saddles from rolling forward. We have different tree shapes you'll find in your photos. In English saddles, there's about 5 standard shapes. There is a hoop tree that fits like this for extremely wide horses, very low profile saddles. These are for tanks. He is almost on the borderline of being on his way. He's gorgeous. He's Rubenesque. I have chubby ones too. He's at the point where he could almost use a hoop tree. There are U trees. The U tree is not a great design and it's not very common. They do fit mules. A lot of mule saddles are going to have a U tree. It's for obviously a horse that's shaped like this. They have a very low wither, low profile. You have almost no wither with the shoulders here, but they're almost slab-sided. They have keyhole trees, which are great. A keyhole tree is quite similar to this, where this is a keyhole. It cuts back here. So there's freedom in the front of the saddle so that you can put it on a higher withered horse and free that wither area, but still maintain the same angles and fit. And then we have A-frame trees, which both those saddles are, where they're very A, and most horses are an A-frame. I would say my most common are keyhole and A-frame. Thoroughbreds fit keyhole trees. They need the wither cut out for the most part. If you don't have the right tree, the point of the tree, it's going to be on different angles on those different types of trees. A forward pointed tree, a lot of jump saddles are more likely to interfere with the horse's body. We're going to grab a couple western trees. Can you hand me the, just one of them? I don't know, whichever. Just, yeah, hand me just the wide places. And they are fiberglass covered wood. These are really good trees, but you also don't want to be touching the tree with your bare hand because you're going to get all little prickers in it. So, set this here. We're going to pop this up. So, this doesn't quite sit. It rolls around pretty badly. Your burr, the burr of the saddle cuts in here. This is bridging. Do you see that gap? All right. So in a Western saddle, not only do you have burr flare, the amount the burr flares out. Gated tree saddles offer our modern Western horses more scapular. We're not asking them to do this tiny little jog. We want to go on a trail ride, we want some decent movement. We want to put a gated tree on the horse so we can really roll its scapula through, the burrs roll open. Gullet width is a big thing in Western saddles, but people don't realize the width and the bar angles are two very different things. You have a photo of that also. And we're going to take the other one and compare them. Great, send it up here and I'll take your other glove from you. I used to handle these barehanded and then had a bad couple days afterwards, so I'll pass. But these are solid wood trees, they're very nice. Do you see the difference here between this wide tree and the extra wide? Do you see the width of the gullet and the bar angle difference? Doesn't look like a lot, it's massive. That's a huge difference. So these bars, the bars of the tree, the rails of the tree. Rails are what they're called in English saddles here. Western it's bars, English it's rails. All different manufacturers use different rail pitches on their saddles. A lot of people will complain, oh, the saddle feels too wide, the twist is too wide. The twist is not too wide. The rail angle is too wide, and you can't quite get your thigh around your horse. So it's just, you have to look for something that, depending on, first off, I go by what your horse's rail angle is. I need to know what the angle he should be wearing. If you don't like the feel of that, or I look at a rider with narrow hips, they're not going to like a wide bar angle. So I have to find a seat that's webbed differently to hide some of that bar angle. So it builds the rider up off the horse a little bit more, but the horse is still in the correct saddle. I have a very funny balancing act about it. I have to look, I know maybe 150 manufacturers, I store them in my brain, just like I really need to. And I will pick maybe a dozen that would work the best on the horse. And then I'm going to look at the rider and figure out what's going to be the best for the rider. I ask what they like. Do they like a big block? Do they like a narrow twist? Where do they like to sit in the saddle? I watch them ride or watch a video, and I have an idea how the horse moves, how the rider moves with the horse. And then I can base it, I can make my recommendations, I can narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 specific brands or models to help somebody speed up the purchase process. So it's nice to not rep anything, because I have the free run of the market on that. Okay, we're going to set this here. That's nice. Okay, we have our burrs flare open. There is no bridging, and the bar angle is really quite good on this horse. He has beautiful wither clearance. So this would be a very good, it's a gated tree because the bar flares and you're resting. And it ends at the right spot on his back. A big thing with Western saddles is they don't have enough rocker to them. They don't have an open enough burr, and these saddles you'll slide your hand underneath, feels good, oh, you have a big gap here, and then a ton of pressure at the very back of the saddle. Western saddles cause a lot of problem. Many horses, a lot of our quarter horses, we have shorter back, closer coupled horses than we used to. They're still trying to put full quarter horse trees and full quarter horse skirts. I think very popular right now, if you want a horse that's trail riding and really needing to move, is a round skirt saddle or a single skirt. A lot of Western saddles have double skirts, one here and you have one coming here. The big problem with a big skirted saddle is you don't have a lot of space here. When this front leg comes forward and this one is all the way back, you close that space by about 4 inches. And a lot of the time the horse is going to feel the interference here or on the shoulder and start short striding. So, and a lot of that will lead to SI issues. You can feel the tension in the SI. So anybody have any questions about this? Yes?
I have a question. I help a lot of my boarders getting with their Western saddles.
Yes.
And it seems like almost every saddle bridges that the bars don't make contact.
Yep.
So, and they have the saddles already. The saddles fit in the shoulder.
Yep.
Because they have flare.
Good. So the shoulder fits, but they bridge.
So what do we do with them?
There's a few brands that you can actually shim inside, like I was talking about between the panel and the tree of an English saddle. Some of them you can get in and shim between the skirt and the tree to increase the rocker. Other ones we have to work with shims attached to a pad.
Yeah, is there a particular pad that you recommend using for that?
There's some. You have a few shimmable pads, but really a wool felt pad is almost always the right way to go. Wool felt, as long as it's a natural wool felt, it's not a nylon felt pad, but a wool felt is going to absorb and hold all these pressure points. So a lot of the time you ride in that wool felt pad for about 20 hours and you try to put your hand back under, you're going to feel that the front of the saddle or wherever the heavy points were are going to have crushed it. It's going to hold it like an orthotic. It doesn't lose its shape and it'll still be filled in where there's that gap. So you break it in and it really is good. You have to make sure that every single saddle pad, every half pad on an English saddle, every Western saddle, we're putting the saddle in the same place on that pad every time because you're going to be breaking it in. In English saddles, I really do feel natural material is really nice. You don't have it overheating. I know there's back on track pads, that's wonderful when it's cold, but one big problem with back on track pads or neoprene pads in Western, any non-slip pads, people use that directly on the skin, you end up sweating out fatty tissue. And what keeps a back healthy is having a lot of fat in that tissue. You want like that nice Kobe beef, right? You want nice fatty tissue. You don't want lean, stringy stuff on a horse's back. So doing what you can to prevent excessive sweating in a horse's back is really going to be a key thing. So what kind of skirt in a Western saddle would you put on this horse? We would put a single skirt around a single skirt. So we have two people who answered that really well. So yes, somebody listened to what I said. That's really exciting. Would this horse wear a point billet or would he not wear a point billet? He would not wear a point billet. Very good. Because he has an uphill wither. He's not completely flat. You're not going to fall off the front of this horse. So we have another question answered right. So please, I like to answer questions right today. Very good.
What's your idea too about Australian saddles?
Australian saddles are tough.
And Canadian saddles.
So, I'll first off say Australian saddles are made for a completely different back shape. Brumbies are not shaped like our horses are.
Okay.
Their conformation is different, and I think the terrain they're on and what they do. If you put one of the saddles that fits one of their horses, because I did, I had a good experience with somebody who had three of them here. Their backs are so different. It's almost like fitting a gaited horse. It's completely different. So you put an Aussie saddle on an Australian Brumby specifically, and that's what they're made for, and that's all. You put an Aussie saddle on, whether it's a Western skirted one or a flocked paneled one, they don't fit our horses quite the same. The Brumbies are very narrow in the shoulder and get broad behind at the back here. They have like almost well-sprung rib cage there. And the Aussie saddles don't fit our horses very well. So that's a big problem. I fight with that. I try to instead encourage somebody to look at a Western endurance saddle. So it fits our horses better. Saddles can be very breed specific. And I do have the issue of, well, I ride a Voltaire. Okay. This Voltaire doesn't fit your horse at all.
It's a Voltaire dressage, a Voltaire obstacle.
What's that?
Which kind of Voltaire? Because they have different kinds.
Right, but they all base it on the same tree. And all they make, a lot of brands will only offer, so let me start here. Saddle companies do not make their trees. There are saddle tree manufacturers, and the saddle companies will buy their trees, and most of them are company standard. A few of them have their custom-made tree. Schlese has a custom-made tree. They have a U tree. There's been a big shortage in trees. Saddle production has been backed up very badly. Steel mills aren't providing what they need, the tree manufacturers closed down during COVID, even though the saddle manufacturers didn't, and then they forced to because they couldn't get the trees. So it's a completely different process, a completely different assembly line, and companies couldn't afford to do it. What they can do is they will rent the patent on a particular tree size. So a lot of the boutique type of saddles, they only offer one tree size. So in, say, Voltaire, they were only offering one tree size. And what they do is, to fit the saddle, they have 4 different shapes of foam, thicknesses of foam. And you will see different contours, different shapes, different thicknesses. So they will put the one that's closest to your horse on that tree. It might be extremely thin on a wide horse or very built up for a narrow one. So one problem I do have with foam is if you have a straight horse, that's great, but I don't know how many of us do. You have to pad to compensate for scapular disparity, any kind of asymmetry. And let's turn him around to face that way. Yes, turn the yellow side. So I want him to look towards the, yeah. So what I'm going to do here is take a quick look at his scapula. So it would be interesting if anybody went to stand up and take a look at his shoulders and tell me what you think about that. It's really valuable to stand up behind your own horse. I'm going to jump up and down. He's good. Left scapula is larger, right? Yeah. So it could be his preferences. A lot of this is these horses are being horses and holding their own body shape for 23 hours a day. They are ridden for maybe an hour, maybe half an hour. And you can't correct their body in that short an amount of time. You really have to, trainers have to be very disciplined. Deborah, for one, knows how hard this is, and the team it takes of chiropractic, massage, saddle fitting, training, everything to try to get a symmetric horse. So unfortunately for most of us, we have to work around this, and I can shim a half pad, maybe I can shim the saddle, we can adjust the flock in the saddle and maintain that so that when the rider's on, this horse isn't dumping her behind his right shoulder. And we did have a bit of a problem with that in the very beginning. With that. So we did have to shim a saddle to compensate for that. And I mean, you're going to say there's quite a few times that you can fix something chiropractically in their low neck to help with shoulder imbalance. Low neck is a big deal, and that can really throw off saddle fit, because if the low neck is out, it can push the shoulder a bit out, and then they're going to dump onto the other side of their body. And I have a lot of people, I had one today, tell me, oh, he's dumping me right and dumping me right, and I'm like, okay, well, ride for me and let me take a look. The horse isn't even lifting his right rib cage. He's not even lifting it. And I'm like, can you put your leg on and lift him? She had to get a dressage whip and give him a good tap behind to get his right hind under him. He lifted up, her saddle straightened out, and I'm like, this isn't a saddle fit problem. So we have a lot of things like that we have to look out for. But key points to take away: kissing spine horses, you have to be careful with the saddle, or you're not going to hit that point of recovery. I don't even like working with somebody with a kissing spine horse who isn't going through the recovery instructions that the vet, the chiropractor, the trainer has gone over with them. If they're not going to do that much, saddle fit isn't going to help anything. And I don't feel like I'm helping the horse in any way. I do this for the benefit of the horse. That's what I get out of this. So horses really gave me my life, and I'm committed to doing the right thing by them. So, do we have other questions?
What about saddles that have adjustable trees that you can
Adjustable gullets. What we have then is no steel spring tree. We have a plastic flexible tree. That can be fine in a lot of cases, but you're still having a lot of flex to it. You have to be a very centered rider, and I don't like putting any kind of adjustable gullet on a horse with an obvious asymmetry in the shoulder. So, yeah. So.
What do you recommend for, I just bought a 3-year-old, so off the track. So he's going to change a lot over the next
In that case, an
year or
adjustable
six.
gullet is fine. Does he have kissing spine?
No.
Okay, then adjustable gullet is great. Make sure you get the right gullet plate so that it's not restrictive. Use the correct billets. There's a lot of saddles out there that are good quality that have adjustable gullets. You don't even have to spend a fortune. The real key thing is a nice wide panel. That's actually why I got that. So I have a mule, she's turning 3, she's a thoroughbred Mammoth Jack, so who knows what I'm going to deal with spine problems. So she's well bred, but I don't know. I bought this saddle for her because it has an adjustable gullet. It has flock panels, it has wide panels. See how wide this is? This is great. You're going to see so many English saddles with really skinny, thin panels. I want to have as much adjustability as I can. I have this cantle gusset. This is great. I can adjust my height and my balance. We have wither gussets, so I can keep it off of her scapula. I can pull flock out of here. I can do a lot with this saddle, but the gullet is wide and the panels are wide. And that's like your biggest thing with a young horse. Give it that kind of freedom of the spine. So, yep. Short and sweet. Anything else? Yeah.
Recommendations for fitting a horse with a good sway back.
Okay, there you're going to have to go with flock saddle. You cannot have something for a sway back horse that could bridge at all in your foam saddle. We cannot put enough rocker to it. There are no foam saddles, unfortunately, that allow a lot of rocker. Most of the time I'm going to recommend a wide paneled saddle so we can put a big adjustment in it and minimal gusset or no gusset in the back so that we can really like fill and make it a banana. Like there's banana panels, there's Swiss panels, what they're called. Something like that is really good. Western, you have a much bigger problem. They don't really make Western saddles for horses with like lordosis or sways. So that's a challenge that I've had to, and I've had to have companies make them. And it requires a lot of shimming as well. But a compact tree, short tree, something like that is better than something long.
I just have a general question. How often do you recommend that people get their saddle checked?
Ooh, that's very personal. All depends on how much the horse is working, the age of the horse. Are you training or not? Do you have physical limitations that could give you an imbalance on that horse? Because that's half of a saddle fit. I have to go through, when I saddle fit, I take a look. Am I like holding this? I'm wearing my body out for no reason. When I take a look at a horse, I go through and I check his body. I use all of my training. I use that little bit I learned about chiropractic to identify issues so that I can, if there's any way I can do a myofascial release to assist that for the temporary, just to get his back relaxed, soft, and as straight as possible for saddle fit, I'm going to do everything I can to do that, whether it's stretching, releasing through muscle. If I have to get into a little bit of deep tissue, I will, because I need to get that horse straight, relaxed, trusting me, so that I can put that saddle on the horse's back. I go through, I take a look at the saddle static. I'll make it, if it's a massive adjustment, a lot of the time, I don't even want to see anybody ride me yet. I want them to spend about 20 hours of breaking it in. Because me looking at this horse, which any one of these vets can tell you, they don't need to see the horse go. If you're not complaining about a soundness and it's just a saddle fit, they don't need to see this horse go to know how it's going to go. We understand his conformation, and I know his muscle development. I'm going to know that this horse is just, you know, he's a heavy mover. He's going to go on his forehand unless you really collect him and bring him up. He's going to have his certain tendencies. And he's got a powerful hind end to push through. So I know how he's going to move. So I'll make a saddle adjustment most of the time. In your case, I have you on. I have the rider ride so I can see rider tendencies, rider balance. Did she have enough block? Is she close enough to the block? Is the block on her saddle too long, too short? Is her knee coming over the front of the flap? We have to look at these things. And then how much cantle support does she have and how much does she need? A lot of horses aren't going to tolerate a severe cantled saddle like that. They're not going to tolerate you up, shutting them down at the stirrup bar or the girth webbing. They're going to want a more open seat. And then I had one the other day yeah, Woodbury one. That horse wouldn't go forward because as soon as she went to ask for the canter, her knee came up to put her low leg on, threw her to the back of the saddle, and she half halted the hind of the horse. So she needs a more upright saddle and a bigger thigh block to push her knee down. I hate to see riders being put somewhere in their saddle, but honestly, when somebody gets into their 60s or 70s, let the saddle help. It's not a good way to learn, but it is a good way to save your ass when you're probably shouldn't be riding. So anyhow, and you're gonna save your horse. You're just gonna save your horse. So sorry, but that's called radical candor. Something I'm learning about. Put it nicely, but put it out there. So really,
Do you
I
attach
have to watch
seat belts to your saddles?
That's right, yeah, duct tape, seat belts, yeah. Right, a carousel pole, anything you can in that respect. My sister has MS, and she has balance issues. So what I did for her saddle, was I added a little bit more to one side, so she wasn't falling that way. So at first, when she gets on, the horse is like, oh, I can feel pressure on that right side. But as he warms up and gets moving, it's supporting Tina from dropping. And there's a lot of riders like that. Hope you didn't mind me mentioning that. I didn't think so. So I have a lot of damage on my right side. I have a tendency to get dropping into my right and get weak, and I drop my right hip. And as I ask for the canter, my horse goes to lift his front leg, bumps me back, and I half halt the leading leg, the left hind. That is such a common problem when I'm watching people ride. And if they tell me, oh, I'm having trouble picking up a canter, that's one of the first things I'm going to look at. But I can balance riders with flock saddles. I can balance riders with half pads. So we can fix a lot of that, and they're like, oh, my horse is back sore because of saddle. And a lot of the time, it's what the rider does. And these big shoulders are going to influence her as a rider. There's no two ways about it. And we need to balance her so that he doesn't throw her all over the place. So that's the last part of my saddle fit, is going through doing the under saddle eval. Because that really tells me a lot. So when I do all of this, I can tell you, are you going to need a saddle fit in 3 months or 6 months, or gosh, you know what? You've got a 3-year-old. Give them a year. So I really don't encourage people to buy saddles for really young horses as a permanent saddle. You're looking, depending on the breed, at least 5 years old. So don't expect to buy your long-term saddle when he's almost 4. So too much change can happen. Anything else? Yes.
Pad, so Western pad, do you use the same pad every day?
I use the same pad with the same horse and the same saddle. I do not use the same pad on 2 horses, and I do not use the same pad on 2 saddles. Again, you want it to be breaking in like an orthotic. You want that to take that shape and have it the same every time.
Okay.
All right? There's also different types of girthing with Western saddles that can really help back pain. And one of the biggest things you can do on a horse that's got kissing spine or back pain is make sure you have enough rocker in the saddle, the shorter skirt, and it's called center fire rigging. I don't know if anybody's familiar. Excellent. So we run our cinch strap through the cinch and then up back through the last ring on the saddle, and then back down to the cinch. And that holds, like a back brace, that holds that saddle quiet so we don't have a fulcrum point at that front cinch with the saddle hopping. And a rear cinch is not going to do that because it shouldn't be tight. If you're putting it on tight, you're doing it wrong, and it's probably going to be a rodeo someday. Because that's basically called a bucking strap and it slips too far back. So, but center fire rigging is a fantastic way to deal with Western kissing spine.
What about shoulder relief for
shoulder relief girths are fantastic. Has to be the right billet configuration, and you have to make sure that that shoulder relief girth is the correct size for the horse. There's you have two different ones. There's a narrow-chested one and a standard one. But as that comes forward and takes that pressure onto the sternum instead of all these sensitive areas here, you want to make sure that it's not interfering with the armpit. It's got to be narrow enough in the center so it's not hitting here and here. If you take one for a test run and you can look at those sweat or dirt marks, the best thing to do is to put some baby powder under and take it for a ride, and it's going to show you where it hits. If it does hit on that curve, on the contour, it's too long. The other thing is you don't want to put a dressage girth much higher than 4 inches above the elbow. This is a little hard to find. But you don't want it any higher because what you're doing is pressuring the rib cage. That person, they're getting pressure on the rib cage, and he's more likely to have ribs out, to not lift his rib cage, and to ignore leg. So, but total saddle fit girths are really fantastic. They've got that beautiful elastic chest. There's several brands out there, but man, they did a good job. So, yes.
On the Western saddle, I'm using on most of my horses like a roping girth because it's wider.
Are you using a mohair, a string girth?
Yeah.
Those are wonderful. Those are really good. But something wide, a wide base girth is a good thing to do. I like roper girths. The thing is, in English saddles too, and in hunt saddles, it's almost a bigger thing. You have this saddle here, wide, and it comes down to this skinny little girth.
Yeah.
You don't have good stability front to back. The wider the girth, the more stability you're going to have, and you're not going to fight a cantle hopping. And in a Western saddle, having something like that, they make total saddle fit girths for them too. Those mohair or the rope girths that are the Roper brand that are wide in the center, those are probably the best going.
And on the double cinch, they're really only used on roping horses. So when you dally, it's not
Correct.
up.
That's correct. So,
Horses.
yeah, that's right.
Saddle.
Good. And breastplates should always be loose. They're there to prevent that saddle from rolling, or in Western, your breastplate is there to prevent that saddle from being pulled off by a cow or a horse making a quick turn on a cutting or reining. Yeah, you want to stay centered. Same with English on those jump saddles. Those should be loose. That's there to, if you have a mishap on a cross-country course or something, you want that saddle to not roll with you if something happens. But a saddle, a breastplate is like a pair of suspenders. If your pants don't fit, then you use something like suspenders. It's the only reason a lot of people use breastplates is to hold the saddle in place, and it's incorrect.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you. Any more specific questions? Then we're going to let you guys approach Karen after we're done. So we want to get out the gifts that we have. Ella, do you want to help us? All right.
This connection. So on him, on a breastplate, that